Hi there, this is Lynn Kane from Puppy Girl Designs. Today I'm with Karen Dorneman of Karen's Quilts, and she is the artist who did the machine quilting for the Woodland Holiday. And I've asked her to talk with us all about the challenges and the ideas about how to quilt around embroidered blocks as opposed to piece blocks. Thank you for joining us, Karen.
It's my pleasure, Lynn. I've been looking forward to this all week.
So, when I first handed this quilt to you, Karen, what did you think?
Well, I said, wow, it's beautiful. Your detail and your embroidery is outstanding. And when I took a look at this quilt, my whole purpose behind quilting for anybody is to bring out the beauty of the work that they've done in the piecing and, in your case, in the embroidery. Mm-hmm. So when I thought about my quilting plan, I knew I was going to have to kind of specify a design for the blocks, which were pieced, as well as some different designs for the embroidered blocks, then deal with the outside embroidered border, and then finally the red border to finish it up. So I had to kind of approach this from a bit of an inside out. And honestly, when I started working on this quilt, I did work on it from the inside out. I started with the center areas with working actually with all of the white. So I started with the pieced areas on the pieced blocks, and using my white thread, I did some continuous curve treatment of that, and that stabilized it, and I did that on all three. There are 3 of these pieced blocks on this beautiful quilt. So I stabilized the quilt just doing the continuous curve on the pieced blocks. Then, still using the white thread, I decided to move into the embroidered blocks because I felt those needed to get done next. And my idea was, of course, stabilization being the first thing to worry about. So I started just by running, like almost stitching in the ditch, a line of stitching around the embroidered elements as close as I could get. And I did that on all 3 of these blocks. Once I did that, I said, well, how am I going to work on these? What's my background fill going to be? On this one, the stars, it's a candle lantern. So I said, oh, it's evening. So I quilted long vertical lines with some stars. And I thought that was perfect. On the block with the cardinals, they're in pine trees. So I thought to kind of imitate the pine branch motif in this block, and I put a little star up in the corner just for fun.
And notice how much your quilting causes the embroidery to pop out.
Oh, for sure.
In this one.
Yeah, and I love that. That gives it a lovely 3-dimensional effect. And being that these are relatively small areas, I think they're really stable, and it really allows the embroidery to stand on its own.
Right.
Down in the last block, which was the wreath, again, I wanted to keep something real simple, so I said, well, let's echo. That'll get me a nice stable background. It's quilted densely enough that I feel it allows the embroidered elements to pop out. So that was what I did first.
Okay.
Then I said, oh, I'm still using some white thread. I think it's time to move into the border. And I did the same thing. I outlined all of the stitching as close as I could get all the way around the entire embroidered border. And then it was time to think about a fill. And I started on the bottom, actually, on this quilt. Normally I start at the top, but somehow I ended up at the bottom to start. And I love feathers. I find feathers give a tremendous amount of beauty to a quilt. Frankly, they're pretty fast when you're quilting them and you have an idea on how to feather. And I love the process. So I have some wonderful rulers that I use to draw the spines of the feathers, and then I did the feathering. And I went up on the inside, but then on the outer part of the border, I feathered all the way around. So I have the continuous feather going all the way around. By the time I got to the top, I didn't want to over feather where these birds were, because they're really they stand out at the top, and I wanted them to really just kind of be on their own. So I stopped my feathers there. And then on the inside part, I didn't want to overdo my feathering because the star of the show is Lynn, and her beautiful, beautiful embroidery work. So I decided to put the stars in on the inside of the border just to stabilize the area. And I felt that that was a good decision. Doesn't over feather, over complicate things, but leaves still, you know, keeps them with the motif.
Do take note how close she went in onto each one of the pine boughs and right along these branches.
Yeah,
so that it does stabilize, but also cause them to pop out a little bit.
Yeah, it's meticulous work, and you have to go real slow, but that's part of what you have to do. The inner red border, which I know is difficult to see, we'll show you the back of it. That's a wide open ribbon candy that done with two layers of stitching. So there's a big loop, and then for the second pass it's a smaller loop, so you get that kind of 3D effect. And then I switched to red thread at that point, and then did some free motion holly and berry on the outer border, and on the inner border, or the inner blocks here in the piece areas, I echoed the holly motif, holly feather. So those were, I felt, all kind of nice elements for your quilt, and I was very happy with how it turned out.
Shall we show them the back so they
Sure.
can fully appreciate it?
One little thread hanging. There always is a thread hanging here or there.
Okay. So by looking at the back, you can see the places where she used the red on the red, where it isn't quite as noticeable. But look at even in the back. See how puffy the embroidered part looks as compared to the quilted down part. That really showcases the actual pattern itself.
It's a lot of fun.
It shows up most often. And was this very difficult to keep doing this free motion? Did it take very long?
I think the trick with anything to do with free motion is just go with it. You know, people say, "Oh, I can't do free motion." Free motion means be free. So I think the best way to do free motion is just to keep it smooth, keep the thread moving, keep the machine moving, or in the case of people that are doing free motion at home, keep that quilt moving, you know, and that's where you're going to find you'll get better results. And if you stop and go, "Oh my God, I just did something, I don't know what to do now," because that's where you get the weird lines.
Right. So you just kind of loosen up and enjoy the process.
Yeah, and I love your flange binding, by the way. Super.
It added just a little.
Isn't that great?
A little something extra to it, so it adds a little punch and also brings some of the white out into the border.
Awesome.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, this has been another wonderful afternoon spent with Karen Dorneman of Karen's Quilts. You can find her both on the web and on Instagram, and be sure to look up and see some of her other spectacular work.
And that's Karen with a Y, Karyn Quilts.
Thank you. Didn't think to mention that. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's been a blast, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.